Imagine walking down the streets of your city, people going about their day, businesses thriving, and communities growing. But have you ever thought about how many undocumented immigrants might be living in your state? Why these places attract so many newcomers and what that means for the future? Is it just border states like Texas and California, or are there surprises in places like Georgia or New Jersey? Today, we're diving into the 10 states with the most illegal immigrants. Let's find out number 10, Washington. Washington. Now, if you think of Washington, you probably imagine Seattle, Mount Rainier, or a state full of coffee lovers. But here's something many people don't realize. Around 300,000 undocumented immigrants live in Washington. That's enough to fill 4 NFL stadiums to maximum capacity, or roughly the entire population of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So, why do so many undocumented immigrants call Washington home? A major reason is agriculture. Washington is the #1 producer of apples in the U.S., growing over 134 million boxes every year. And guess who does a huge portion of the harvesting? Immigrant labor. The farming industry in Washington, which also includes hops for beer, cherries, and pears, relies on a workforce that is estimated to be over 40% undocumented. Beyond farming, Washington's tech industry is a massive draw. With companies like Amazon and Microsoft headquartered in Seattle, the state has a strong job market. Many undocumented immigrants find work in supporting industries like cleaning services, food delivery, and construction. In fact, the construction industry in Washington has grown by 22% in the last decade, creating a constant demand for labor. Another key factor? Washington is a sanctuary state. This means local law enforcement does not cooperate with federal immigration authorities like ICE, making it a safer option for undocumented immigrants compared to states with stricter laws. On top of that, Washington offers driver's licenses to undocumented residents, making life significantly easier for those who settle here. Number 9, Massachusetts. Massachusetts, home to over 300,000 undocumented immigrants. That's more than the entire city of St. Louis. If you're wondering how Massachusetts, a state known for Ivy League schools, Boston accents, and clam chowder, ended up on this list, let me break it down for you. First, let's talk about jobs. Massachusetts is home to some of the most advanced industries in the country: biotech, healthcare, and education. In Boston alone, medical research brings in over $3 billion annually, and hospitals like Mass General and Brigham and Women's employ thousands of workers, including many undocumented immigrants in cleaning, maintenance, and food service roles. Speaking of education, Massachusetts has some of the world's best universities, including Harvard and MIT. These institutions attract thousands of international students, and some of them overstay their visas, adding to the undocumented population. A 2023 report found that nearly 50,000 students in the U.S. become undocumented each year due to expired visas. And Massachusetts is a prime spot for this trend. Massachusetts also has one of the largest Salvadoran and Brazilian immigrant communities in the U.S., and these networks provide strong support systems for new arrivals. In cities like Chelsea and Lawrence, nearly 40% of the population is foreign-born. These tight-knit communities make it easier for new undocumented immigrants to find work, housing, and social connections. Another reason Massachusetts makes this list? The state's policies favor immigrants. In 2022, Massachusetts voted to allow undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's licenses, making it one of the few states with such a policy. And like Washington, Massachusetts is considered a sanctuary state, meaning state and local police do not assist federal immigration enforcement. So while Massachusetts is famous for being the birthplace of the American Revolution, it's also one of the strongest immigrant-friendly states today, making it a top choice for undocumented immigrants seeking stability and opportunity. Number 8, North Carolina. North Carolina, a state known for barbecue, college basketball, and a massive immigrant population? Yep. North Carolina is home to over 325,000 undocumented immigrants, which is almost the entire population of New Orleans. But what's bringing so many immigrants to the Tar Heel state? One major reason is agriculture. North Carolina ranks #1 in the U.S. for sweet potato production, harvesting over 2 billion pounds every year. And who's doing a lot of the hard labor in these fields? You guessed it, immigrants. In fact, more than 60% of farm workers in North Carolina are undocumented, and without them, the state's agriculture industry would be in serious trouble. It's not just farms. North Carolina's construction industry has been booming for the past decade. With cities like Charlotte and Raleigh experiencing rapid growth, the demand for housing, office buildings, and infrastructure projects has skyrocketed. As a result, construction companies rely heavily on immigrant labor, particularly undocumented workers who make up nearly 20% of the construction workforce. Another surprising reason North Carolina is so attractive to undocumented immigrants: cost of living. Compared to states like California and New York, housing and daily expenses in North Carolina are much more affordable. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Charlotte is around $1,400, while in Los Angeles, it's over $2,500. This affordability allows immigrants to stretch their earnings further, making it an ideal place to settle. Politically, North Carolina has mixed policies regarding immigration. While some cities have cracked down on undocumented immigrants, others like Durham and Chapel Hill have embraced immigrant-friendly policies. This balance makes it a viable option for many undocumented workers who want job opportunities without the high risks of deportation seen in stricter states. With a mix of job availability, affordability, and existing immigrant communities, North Carolina has quietly become one of the biggest hubs for undocumented immigrants in the U.S. Number 7. Georgia. Georgia, a state famous for peaches, Coca-Cola, and some of the best Southern hospitality in the country. But what many people don't realize is that Georgia is home to around 350,000 undocumented immigrants, which is more than the entire population of Honolulu, Hawaii. Now, why is Georgia such a hot spot for illegal immigration? One big reason is Atlanta. The city's rapid economic growth over the past 2 decades has turned it into a magnet for immigrants. With a GDP of over $450 billion, Atlanta's job market is booming, and many of those jobs are in industries that rely heavily on immigrant labor. The construction industry alone employs over 25% undocumented workers, and as Atlanta continues to expand, that demand is only increasing. But it's not just construction. Georgia is also a powerhouse in agriculture. The state is one of the top producers of peanuts, onions, and blueberries in the U.S., and farms depend heavily on immigrant labor. A shocking 60% of all farm workers in Georgia are estimated to be undocumented. Without them, the state's massive $73 billion agricultural industry would struggle to function. Another reason undocumented immigrants settle here? Cost of living. Compared to states like California and New York, Georgia is much more affordable. The median home price in Atlanta is $400,000, compared to over $800,000 in Los Angeles. That's a massive difference for immigrants looking to build a life without spending a fortune on rent and expenses. However, Georgia is also one of the strictest states when it comes to immigration enforcement. In 2022, a law was passed requiring businesses with more than 10 employees to verify workers' legal status using E-Verify, a system that checks immigration status. Additionally, some counties in Georgia actively cooperate with ICE, making it riskier for undocumented immigrants compared to sanctuary states like Washington or Massachusetts. Despite these challenges, Georgia remains a top destination for undocumented immigrants due to its strong job market, large immigrant communities, and affordable cost of living. And with Atlanta continuing to grow, it doesn't look like that trend is slowing down anytime soon. Number 6. Illinois. Illinois, home to 400,000 undocumented immigrants. That's more people than the entire population of Miami Beach, Florida. And most of them? They're living in Chicago, one of the most immigrant-friendly cities in the United States. Chicago has a long history of immigration, dating back to the late 1800s, when waves of Europeans arrived in search of work. Fast forward to today, and the city remains a top destination for immigrants, especially those from Mexico, Guatemala, and the Philippines. A whopping 20% of Chicago's population is foreign-born, and many of them are undocumented. So why is Illinois such a popular place for illegal immigration? First, let's talk about jobs. The state has a massive economy, over $1 trillion in GDP, and industries like hospitality, manufacturing, and construction rely heavily on immigrant labor. In fact, studies show that over 30% of Chicago's restaurant workforce consists of undocumented workers. And let's be real, Chicago's deep dish pizza wouldn't be the same without them. But here's another reason Illinois is so attractive. It's one of the most pro-immigrant states in the country. Unlike Georgia, Illinois is a sanctuary state, meaning local police do not work with ICE to deport undocumented immigrants. In 2021, the state even passed a law banning private immigration detention centers and restricted law enforcement from asking about immigration status. This makes Illinois one of the safest places for undocumented immigrants to live without fear of deportation. Another huge benefit? Driver's licenses for undocumented residents. Since 2013, Illinois has issued over 300,000 temporary visitor driver's licenses, allowing undocumented immigrants to drive legally, something many states don't offer. Of course, life isn't perfect for undocumented immigrants in Illinois. While jobs are available, the cost of living in Chicago is high. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in the city is around $2,200, and taxes in Illinois are some of the highest in the country. But for many immigrants, the trade-off is worth it. A strong job market, a welcoming government, and an established immigrant community make Illinois a top choice for undocumented workers looking to build a life in the U.S. Number 5. New Jersey. New Jersey, a small state with a huge undocumented immigrant population. With around 475,000 undocumented immigrants, New Jersey has more undocumented residents than the entire state of Wyoming, Vermont, and North Dakota combined. But why is New Jersey such a big deal for immigration? One major reason: its location. New Jersey is right next to New York City, one of the biggest immigrant hubs in the world. Many undocumented immigrants live in New Jersey but work in NYC, where they find opportunities in industries like food service, construction, and domestic work. New Jersey is also home to some of the largest immigrant communities in the U.S. In cities like Paterson, Elizabeth, and Newark, more than 40% of the population is foreign-born. Spanish is spoken everywhere, and entire neighborhoods are filled with immigrant-owned businesses. These tight-knit communities help undocumented immigrants find jobs, housing, and social connections, making the transition to life in the U.S. much easier. Another huge factor? New Jersey's economy is booming. The state has one of the highest median household incomes in the country, around $96,000, and a strong job market that attracts immigrant workers. Industries like warehousing, transportation, and healthcare are expanding fast, and many of these jobs rely on undocumented labor. But here's the kicker. New Jersey is also one of the most pro-immigrant states in America. In 2019, the state passed a law allowing undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's licenses. And in 2021, Governor Phil Murphy signed a bill that expanded state-funded healthcare for undocumented children. On top of that, New Jersey is a sanctuary state, meaning police do not cooperate with ICE unless required by federal law. However, just like Illinois, New Jersey is expensive. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Jersey City is $2,500, and property taxes are some of the highest in the country. Still, for undocumented immigrants who want to live near New York City without paying NYC prices, New Jersey remains a top choice. Number 4. New York. New York is on the list. With an estimated 800,000 undocumented immigrants, New York is home to more undocumented residents than the entire population of Boston, Massachusetts. That's insane. But honestly, this isn't shocking. New York has always been an immigrant state, dating back to the early 1900s when Ellis Island was the first stop for millions of newcomers. Today, more than 23% of New York's population is foreign-born, making it one of the most diverse states in the country. So, why do undocumented immigrants love New York? Let's start with the biggest reason: New York City. With a $2 trillion GDP, NYC is an economic powerhouse, offering endless job opportunities. Industries like hospitality, construction, domestic work, and retail are full of immigrant workers, many of whom are undocumented. In fact, studies estimate that 1 out of every 5 workers in New York City is an immigrant without legal status. Another huge factor? New York is one of the most pro-immigrant states in the U.S. Unlike states like Georgia or Texas, where undocumented immigrants live in fear of deportation, New York is a sanctuary state, meaning local police do not work with ICE. In 2019, the state even passed the Green Light Law, allowing undocumented residents to apply for driver's licenses. That law alone impacted over 750,000 people who could now legally drive without fear. But there's a downside. New York is expensive. The cost of living here is one of the highest in the world. The median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan is around $4,500, and even in immigrant-heavy areas like Queens or the Bronx, rent still averages $2,200 to $3,000. Despite this, many undocumented workers live in shared apartments, sometimes with multiple families in one unit, just to afford life in the Big Apple. Even with these challenges, New York remains a top destination for undocumented immigrants. With a strong economy, a massive immigrant community, and protections from deportation, it's easy to see why so many choose to make the Empire State their home. Number 3. Florida. Florida, home to around 1 million undocumented immigrants, more than the entire population of Austin, Texas. Florida's immigrant population has skyrocketed over the past few decades, and there's a big reason for that. Miami. Miami is one of the most immigrant-friendly cities in the U.S., with over 70% of its population being Latino, and Spanish is spoken almost as much as English. If you're an undocumented immigrant from Latin America, you can move to Miami and immediately feel at home. Another major draw: jobs, jobs, jobs. Florida has a $1.5 trillion economy, driven by tourism, agriculture, and construction, all industries that heavily rely on immigrant labor. In fact, a shocking 30% of all construction workers in Florida are undocumented, helping build the luxury condos, hotels, and resorts that make the state famous. And let's talk about agriculture. Florida is the #1 producer of oranges in the U.S., and nearly 50% of farm workers are undocumented immigrants. Without them, Florida's massive $7 billion agriculture industry would collapse. However, Florida isn't as welcoming as New York. In 2023, Governor Ron DeSantis signed one of the toughest immigration laws in the country, requiring employers with 25-plus employees to verify immigration status. The law also criminalizes transporting undocumented immigrants and restricts access to healthcare for the undocumented. Many immigrants actually left the state because of these harsh policies. Despite these challenges, Florida remains one of the top states for undocumented immigrants. With its strong economy, Latin American culture, and job opportunities, it continues to attract hundreds of thousands of undocumented residents every year. Number 2. Texas. Texas, home to an estimated 1.8 million undocumented immigrants. That's more than the entire population of Phoenix, Arizona. Why so many? Well, Texas shares a 1,254-mile border with Mexico, making it one of the most common entry points for undocumented immigrants. But it's not just about geography. Texas also has one of the strongest economies in the U.S., with a GDP of over $2.4 trillion. The state thrives on industries like construction, agriculture, oil, and manufacturing, all of which rely heavily on immigrant labor. In fact, over 40% of Texas farm workers are undocumented. Cities like Houston, Dallas, and Austin have large immigrant communities that provide jobs, housing, and support networks for newcomers. Houston alone is home to nearly 600,000 undocumented immigrants, making it one of the biggest hubs for illegal migration in the country. Many undocumented workers take on jobs in roofing, landscaping, hospitality, and food services, sectors that are always in demand. However, Texas isn't exactly welcoming. The state has some of the strictest immigration laws in the U.S. Unlike sanctuary states like California and New York, Texas actively cooperates with ICE, leading to thousands of deportations each year. The state has also spent billions on border security, deploying the National Guard, installing razor wire, and even building its own sections of a border wall. But despite these challenges, immigrants keep coming because Texas offers jobs, affordable housing, and economic stability. Unlike California, where the median home price is $800,000, in Texas, it's around $320,000, making it an attractive option for those looking to settle. Even with increasing immigration crackdowns, Texas remains one of the top destinations for undocumented immigrants. The promise of work, family connections, and the chance for a better life continue to draw people in. Love it or hate it, immigration is a major part of the Texas story. Number 1. California. California, the state with the largest undocumented population in the country, over 2.2 million people. That's more undocumented immigrants than the entire population of New Mexico. So, why is California the #1 destination for undocumented immigrants? 3 big reasons: economy, diversity, and immigrant-friendly laws. First, let's talk about jobs. California has the largest economy in the U.S., $4.1 trillion. If it were a country, it would be the 5th largest economy in the world. Industries like agriculture, entertainment, and tech provide millions of jobs, many of which are filled by undocumented workers. In fact, over 50% of all farm workers in California are undocumented, making them essential to the state's massive $50 billion agricultural industry. Then there's diversity. California is home to the largest Latino population in the U.S., and in cities like Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Jose, entire neighborhoods are built around immigrant communities. Spanish is spoken everywhere, and undocumented immigrants can find support systems that make life easier. Finally, California is one of the most immigrant-friendly states in America. The state offers driver's licenses, healthcare, and even in-state college tuition for undocumented residents. And because California is a sanctuary state, law enforcement does not cooperate with ICE, making it one of the safest places for undocumented immigrants. Of course, there's one huge downside. California is crazy expensive. The median home price is $800,000, and rent in Los Angeles can be $3,000 plus for a 1-bedroom. But for many undocumented immigrants, the opportunities outweigh the costs, making California the #1 state for undocumented residents in America.